I once met a man who had spent his life in quiet contemplation. He had seen the seasons change more times than he could count, watched people come and go like shadows passing through the streets of time. He told me, "The greatest illusion we live under is that death is the end. But what if it is not? What if death is merely a return, a dissolving of the self into something far greater than we can comprehend?" His words stayed with me, lingering in my thoughts during sleepless nights and quiet mornings. We fear death not because we understand it, but because we don't. It is the unknown, the great abyss, the silent question that no one can answer. But perhaps, in the pursuit of understanding, we have been asking the wrong questions all along. Schopenhauer believed that death was not the opposite of life, but rather its silent partner. He saw existence as a fleeting spark in an infinite void, a moment of light in an endless ocean of darkness. And yet, he did not despair. He believed that the individual self, the I that we cling to so desperately, was merely a temporary illusion, a ripple on the surface of something far greater. To Schopenhauer, death was not to be feared, because it was not a loss but a return. Think about the time before you were born. There was no suffering, no fear, no longing, just nothingness. And yet, do you fear that nothingness? Number. Because it was not something you experienced, why then do we fear the nothingness that comes after? Is it because we have tasted existence, and now the thought of losing it terrifies us? Or is it because we have been conditioned to see death as an ending rather than a transition? I once spoke to a woman whose father had spent his final years battling illness. She told me that in his last days, he did not speak of achievements or regrets. He spoke of small, quiet moments, the way the air smelled after it rained, the warmth of sunlight on his skin, the laughter of his children echoing through their home. It wasn't the great milestones that mattered in the end, she said. It was the little things, the things we forget to cherish. Maybe the reason we fear death is because we have not yet learned how to live. We are so obsessed with the idea of leaving something behind, of making a mark, of proving that we were here, that we forget to actually be here. We chase time as if it is something to be conquered, something to be owned. But time does not belong to us. It never has. Schopenhauer wrote that life is like a dream, fleeting, impermanent, a brief flicker before we awaken into something else. If we could accept this, truly accept it, then maybe we could let go of our fear. Maybe we could live, not in defiance of death, but in harmony with it. There is a story of a monk who was asked what the meaning of life was. He picked up a cup, held it in his hands, and said, "To me, this cup is already broken. I drink from it, I enjoy it, but I know that one day it will shatter. And because I accept this, I do not cling to it. I do not fear its loss. I simply appreciate it while it is here." What if we could see our own lives in the same way? What if, instead of fearing the inevitable, we embraced it? Not with despair, but with reverence, with gratitude for the moments we are given, rather than longing for more. So, the question is not why we fear death. The question is, why do we fear letting go? Because perhaps if we learned how to let go, we would finally learn how to live. There is a curious paradox in our relationship with time. We long for more of it, yet we squander what we have. We fear that death will take everything from us, yet we often live as if we have an eternity to waste. Schopenhauer described life as a pendulum swinging between suffering and boredom. In our youth, we suffer from desires unfulfilled, from ambitions not yet realized. As we age, we reach a point where those desires fade, but in their absence, we find something else, a deep, aching emptiness. What is this emptiness, if not a fear that time is slipping through our fingers? I once heard a story of a man who had everything, wealth, success, admiration. Yet in the quiet of the night he admitted to a friend, "I have spent my whole life building something that death will take away in an instant." It was not loss that frightened him, but the realization that he had spent so much time pursuing things that would never last. So what is it that truly lasts? What remains when everything else is stripped away? Is it our achievements? Our names? Or is it something else, something far more subtle, something we fail to recognize because we are too busy chasing permanence in an impermanent world? A philosopher once said, "What we do in life echoes in eternity." But perhaps eternity is not some vast, unreachable future. Perhaps eternity is in the present moment, in the way we breathe, in the way we love, in the way we embrace each fleeting second as if it is all we will ever have. Because in the end it is. The fear of death is, at its core, a fear of the unknown. But what if the unknown is simply the return to a place we have already been? What if, instead of seeing death as an ending, we saw it as part of the great cycle of existence? What if, instead of fearing the dark, we learned to find peace within it? There is an old saying, "To die before you die is to know what it means to truly live." Perhaps that is the secret, not to fight against time, not to resist the inevitable, but to accept it, to find in death not an enemy, but a teacher. Maybe the question is not why we fear death, but why we fear embracing life fully, knowing that it will end. Because once we do that, once we truly live, death loses its power over us. There is a quiet beauty in endings. The way the sun sets after a long day, the way a song fades into silence, the way a story finds its final words. We fear these endings, and yet they are what give meaning to everything that comes before them. What if we could see death in the same way? Not as a cruel interruption, but as the final, necessary note in the song of our existence. What if, instead of resisting it, we allowed ourselves to listen, to truly hear the way it completes the melody? Life is not measured by its length, but by its depth. Perhaps the way to overcome the fear of death is not to seek more years, but to live each moment as if it were infinite, because in a way it is. Maybe, in the grand scheme of things, death is not the end of the story. Maybe it is simply the turning of a page. Maybe, just maybe, the final silence is not an end, but the beginning of something greater. And so, instead of fearing the darkness, we can choose to embrace it, to trust that just beyond what we can see, there is something waiting. Not an end, but a transformation. Not a void, but a return to the vast, infinite unknown from which we once came. If we are to truly understand why we fear death, we must first confront the illusion that underpins so much of our lives, the illusion of permanence. From the moment we are born, we are taught to build, to accumulate, to strive for things that we believe will last: wealth, status, relationships, legacies. We are told that these things will give our lives meaning, that they will shield us from the void. But what happens when we realize that nothing lasts, that everything we build, everything we love, everything we are, is subject to the relentless march of time? Schopenhauer, in his piercing wisdom, saw this clearly. He understood that life is a constant oscillation between desire and dissatisfaction. We chase after goals, believing that their attainment will bring us peace, only to find that peace is fleeting. The moment we achieve one thing, we are already reaching for the next, and in those rare moments when we have nothing left to chase, we are confronted with the emptiness that lies beneath the surface of our busy lives. This emptiness, this quiet dread, is the shadow of death. It is the reminder that no matter how much we achieve, no matter how much we accumulate, time will eventually take it all away. But what if this emptiness is not something to be feared? What if it is, instead, a doorway, a gateway to a deeper understanding of what it means to live? What if the fear of death is not a curse, but a gift a reminder that our time here is limited and that every moment is precious. Let us consider for a moment the nature of time itself. We often think of time as a linear progression, a straight line stretching from birth to death. But what if time is not linear at all? What if it is more like a spiral or a circle? What if the past, the present, and the future are not separate but interconnected? What if every moment contains within it the seeds of eternity? The ancient Greeks had two words for time, chronos and kairos. Chronos is the time we measure, the seconds, the minutes, the hours. It is the time of clocks and calendars, the time that slips through our fingers, no matter how tightly we try to hold on to it. Kairos, on the other hand, is something else entirely. It is the right moment, the opportune moment, the moment when everything aligns. It is the time of meaning, of significance, of depth. And it is in Kairos that we find the antidote to our fear of death. When we live in Chronos, we are always running out of time. We are always chasing, always striving, always worrying about what comes next. But when we live in Kairos, we are fully present. We are not worried about the past or the future because we are immersed in the now. And in the now, there is no fear of death because there is no fear at all. There is only life in all its richness and complexity. This is not to say that we should abandon our ambitions or stop striving for greatness. On the contrary, it is to say that we should strive with a different understanding. We should strive not because we believe our achievements will make us immortal, but because the act of striving itself is meaningful. We should love not because we believe our love will last forever, but because love in the moment is its own reward. We should live not because we are afraid of death, but because life in all its fleeting beauty is worth living. And here we come to the heart of the matter. The fear of death is not really a fear of death at all. It is a fear of not having lived. It is a fear of reaching the end of our lives and realizing that we have spent our time chasing shadows, building castles in the sand, only to watch them wash away with the tide. It is a fear of regret, of missed opportunities, of moments lost to distraction and indifference. But what if we could let go of that fear? What if we could embrace the impermanence of life, not as a curse, but as a liberation? What if we could see every moment as a gift, every breath as a miracle, every encounter as an opportunity to connect, to grow, to be fully alive? This is the challenge that death presents to us. It is not a challenge to defeat death, or to outrun it, or to deny it. It is a challenge to live in such a way that death becomes irrelevant. To live in such a way that when death comes, it finds us ready, not because we have accomplished everything we set out to do, but because we have lived fully, deeply, authentically. And how do we do this? How do we live in a way that transcends the fear of death? The answer, I believe, lies in the present moment. It lies in the way we pay attention to the world around us, in the way we listen to the people we love, in the way we savor the simple pleasures of life. It lies in the way we let go of our need for control, our need for certainty, our need for permanence. It lies in the way we embrace the unknown, not as something to be feared, but as something to be explored. There is a story about a Zen master who was asked by his student, "What happens after we die?" The master replied, "I don't know." The student, confused, said, "But you're a Zen master. Surely you must know." The master smiled and said, "Yes, I am a Zen master, but I am not a dead Zen master." The point of this story is not to dismiss the question of what happens after death, but to remind us that the answer is ultimately unknowable. And because it is unknowable, it is not where we should focus our energy. Instead, we should focus on what we do know, that we are alive right now, in this moment, and that this moment is all we have. So let us not waste it. Let us not squander it in fear, in regret, in distraction. Let us embrace it fully and completely. Let us live as if this moment is all that matters, because it is. And in doing so, perhaps we will find that death is not something to be feared, but something to be understood. Not as an ending, but as a part of the great, mysterious, beautiful cycle of existence. And perhaps, in the end, that is the greatest lesson death has to teach us. That life is not about how long we live, but about how deeply we live. That the measure of a life is not in its duration, but in its intensity. That the true meaning of life is not found in the pursuit of permanence, but in the embrace of impermanence. So let us live boldly, let us love fiercely, let us be present fully and completely in every moment we are given, and let us not fear death, but instead let us fear only one thing, the possibility of not having truly lived. If we are to truly confront our fear of death, we must also confront the question of meaning. What is it that gives our lives purpose? Is it the goals we set for ourselves, the relationships we nurture, the legacy we leave behind? Or is it something more elusive, something that cannot be measured or quantified, something that exists beyond the boundaries of time and space? Schopenhauer, ever the pessimist, saw life as a constant struggle against meaninglessness. He believed that our desires and ambitions were nothing more than illusions, distractions from the fundamental truth that life is suffering. And yet, even in his bleakest moments, he acknowledged that there is a strange beauty in this struggle, that in our attempts to find meaning, we create something, art, music, literature, love, that transcends the suffering, that in our fleeting moments of joy, we catch a glimpse of something eternal. But what is this something eternal? Is it God? Is it the universe itself? Or is it something within us, something that cannot be named or defined, but only felt? Perhaps it is the spark of consciousness, the awareness that we are alive, that we exist, that we are part of something greater than ourselves. And perhaps it is this spark that gives our lives meaning, even in the face of death. Let us consider for a moment the paradox of meaning in a finite existence. On the one hand, we are finite beings, bound by time and space, destined to die. On the other hand, we are capable of imagining the infinite, of dreaming of eternity, of creating works that outlast us. How do we reconcile these two truths? How do we find meaning in a life that is, by its very nature, temporary? One answer lies in the concept of amor fati, the love of fate. This idea, championed by the Stoics and later by Nietzsche, is the acceptance of everything that happens to us, good or bad, as necessary and even desirable. It is the understanding that our lives, with all their joys and sorrows, are part of a larger whole, and that every moment, no matter how painful, contributes to the richness of our existence. To love our fate is to embrace life in its entirety, to say yes to everything, even to death. But this is easier said than done. How do we love a fate that includes suffering, loss, and ultimately death? How do we find meaning in a world that seems, at times, so cruel and indifferent? The answer, I believe, lies in the way we choose to see the world. It lies in the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives we create to make sense of our lives. It lies in the way we transform our suffering into something meaningful, something that connects us to others, something that gives us a sense of purpose. Consider the story of Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and the author of Man's Search for Meaning. In the depths of the concentration camps, Frankl observed that those who survived were not necessarily the strongest or the healthiest, but those who had a sense of purpose, a reason to live. For some, it was the love of a family member waiting for them. For others, it was the hope of creating something beautiful, something that would outlast the horror. Frankl himself found meaning in the idea that even in the worst circumstances, we have the freedom to choose our attitude, to find meaning in our suffering. This is not to say that suffering is good or that we should seek it out, but it is to say that even in the darkest moments, we have the power to create meaning. We have the power to transform our pain into something that gives our lives depth and richness. And in doing so, we transcend the fear of death, because we realize that our lives are not defined by their length, but by their depth. But what about those moments when meaning seems impossible to find? What about the times when we are overwhelmed by despair, when the world feels empty and meaningless? In those moments, perhaps the best we can do is to simply be present, to sit with our pain, to acknowledge it, to let it be. And in that act of presence, we may find that meaning is not something we create, but something we discover. That it is not something outside of us, but something within us. That it is not something we need to chase, but something that is already here, waiting for us to notice it. And here we come to another paradox. The more we chase meaning, the more it eludes us. The more we try to hold on to it, the more it slips through our fingers. But when we let go, when we stop trying so hard, when we simply allow ourselves to be, meaning often finds us. It comes in the form of a quiet moment of connection, a sudden burst of inspiration, a deep sense of peace. It comes when we least expect it, when we are not looking for it. This is the mystery of meaning. It is not something we can control or possess. It is something we can only experience in moments of presence, of openness, of vulnerability. And perhaps that is why the fear of death is so closely tied to the fear of meaninglessness. Because death reminds us that we cannot control everything, that we cannot hold on to anything, that we are ultimately at the mercy of forces beyond our understanding. But what if we could see this lack of control not as a weakness, but as a strength? What if we could embrace the uncertainty, the impermanence, the mystery of life? What if we could see death not as the enemy of meaning, but as its companion? Because it is precisely the fact that life is finite that makes it so precious. It is precisely the fact that we cannot hold on to anything that makes every moment so valuable. In the end, perhaps the question is not how to find meaning in a finite existence, but how to live in such a way that meaning finds us. How to live with openness, with curiosity, with love. How to live in a way that honors the mystery of life, that embraces the unknown, that celebrates the fleeting beauty of every moment. And perhaps, in doing so, we will find that death is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced, not as an ending, but as a part of the journey, not as a thief, but as a teacher, not as the enemy of meaning, but as its ultimate expression,